Good morning. My name is Valerie Leonard. I am the founder of Nonprofit Utopia. We're the ideal community for emerging nonprofit leaders. And I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Before we get started, I'd like for you to check in. Let us know who you are, where you're from, what organization you're from, any experience that you've had in social enterprise, any questions that you have, please feel free to post. And at the end of the presentation, I will answer your questions. All right. So for those of you who have been following along and those of you who are in the Nonprofit Utopia community, you know that today is the day that we focus on how you test your model for social enterprise. You also know that we are spending this full month on social enterprise, and we have about, I believe, 10 different sessions, and we're about halfway through. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen and we will talk about how you can test your model. All right. So all too often, it is our knee-jerk reaction, especially if we're creative, if we're entrepreneurial, is to rely on our own knowledge and just jump out and, do our thing, right? There is a way that we can save money, be a little bit more disciplined, where we actually test our models. So for the first few days of this series, we've been focusing on the art of starting your own social enterprise. Today, we're going to be focusing literally on the science. And when I say science, I'm not talking about mixing chemicals and all that other stuff, but I'm talking about doing real experiments with real data that will help you make informed decisions as to how you should be going forward. So, we're going to talk today about how to test your business model before you launch. And in fact, you might have to do several launches before you get it right. All right, so in our last four videos, we learned how one, to assess your readiness to start a social enterprise. And while we're focusing primarily on nonprofits who want to do a social enterprise, these lessons that we're covering are very, very essential, even if you're in for profit already. We are also sharing different, uh, ah, I can't get my words together today. Let me stop thinking so hard. We're also sharing different resources in the Nonprofit Utopia community. So if you are a member, you will have access to handouts from this video as well as the other videos that we've shared. We also shared with you how to research your idea, and you can go and check out that video on YouTube. We showed you how to identify your unique value proposition. And yesterday we focused on how you can take that unique value proposition and build around it and develop your model for your business. So today we're going to show you how to actually test that model after you've gone through the exercises for developing your value proposition and your business model. So you're going to get today an overview of the business model canvas as well as an overview, rather a review of the business model canvas. Ah, canvas, as well as an overview of the value proposition canvas, and we'll build upon that. You'll also have an opportunity to ask questions on live chat. You'll get a copy of all the tools that we're using. If you're a member of the Nonprofit Utopia community, you can just go into the community and do a search of the resources so that you can download them. And then, so that includes tools to test your idea as well as tools to actually flesh out your ideas and make sure that they're feasible. And then everyone will have access to this live stream. All right, so this presentation is based on the work of the folks at Strategizer, as well as the book by Alex Osterwalder. All right, so there are tools developed by strategizer.com that we'll be talking about. And then there is also a blog post in the blog from Strategizer that shows you how you can test your model. All right, so just for review, we're going to talk about our working definition of a unique value proposition. It's not just in our minds what we think differentiates us, but it's really trying to get into the mind of our customer and figuring out ways we can position our products and services so that they meet the needs of the customer. So it is a bundle of products, services, and programs that create value for a particular customer segment. And remember, value is not what we think is important. Value is not the features, but value is what the customer needs. Something that's going to solve their problem. Most importantly, is something they want and something they will pay for. That's where the value is created. And simply put, it's a set of benefits designed to attract customers. All right, we also shared with you last week that the real value is created when we can create products and services that will meet our customers where they are. So we have to have a good understanding of how they go about their day-to-day lives, whether it's in their professional lives or their personal lives. And the one that we care about depends on what products and services we are trying to sell. If it's consumer products we're trying to sell, then we care about their lifestyles, right? If it's a business product we're trying to sell, then we care about how they go about their day-to-day business. So we need to understand customer jobs. We need to understand what their gains are or what they aspire to achieve on a daily basis. And then we need to understand what their pain points are, what pains they're trying to avoid. And once we know that, we want to develop products and services that actually are gain creators, meaning it helps them to achieve their goals. And we also want to have features that help them to actually reduce any pain that they're having. And in the end, our products and services are going to make their lives easier. All right. And we shared yesterday that the center of your business model canvas is those value propositions. So whereas the value proposition told you what's valuable, what's of value, the business model canvas tells you how you're going to deliver that value. It talks about the partners you're going to need in order to deliver value to your clients. It talks about the key activities in which you're going to engage, the key resources, the value propositions, because remember, everything builds around value. It's going to also describe the customer relationships, how you actually relate to your customer. It's going to talk about the distribution channels as well as the communications channels as well as the sales channel. And then it'll talk about the customer segments that you have. You might be selling the same product to different types of people or different groups of people, and they will probably have different value propositions. And you'll have to be able to speak to all those different customer segments. And then we talked about the cost structure. So how much is it going to cost to actually deliver value? And we're talking about delivering value in the form of a product or service. So you're going to look at how much it costs to engage and retain partners. You're going to talk about the cost for the key activities, the key resources that you're going to need, how much it's going to cost you to engage your customers through various relationship channels, sales channels, distribution channels. All of that stuff comes at a cost. How much is it going to cost to actually reach them? And then you look at all the various streams that could have costs associated with them, and then you total up that cost. And then the same with the revenue streams. Where are your revenues coming from? Is it going to come from ad sales? Is it going to come from subscriptions? Is it going to come from sales of a product? Is it going to come from rental revenue? and all of that good stuff. So what you'll do is you will list out your revenue streams and give a sense for how much you think you can raise from each revenue stream, and hopefully your revenue is going to exceed your cost. All right, so you finish your business model canvas. What are the next steps? um, One way you can test, we're going to go over 4 different ways that you can test your product idea or your service idea. um, this happens when you believe your customer has a problem. Why do you believe that the customer has a problem? You've just taken all of that time to, uncover, what's going on in prospective customers' heads, what they do on a day-to-day basis, what their pain points are, what they're trying to achieve. So based on those conversations you've had, based on what you've read, based on any surveys that you may have taken, any focus groups you may have facilitated, you have a good reason to believe that your customer has a problem. You have data that suggests that they have a problem. However, even at that, you still don't know whether or not you're right, right? So the first thing you want to do is actually get out and talk to people again. You have to talk to people in order to generate some of that information for your value proposition, but you're going to get out again and try to get, try to go a little bit deeper, right? So you're going to have quick meetings anywhere from a half hour to an hour. You're going to, get into, some of the qualitative insights that you have and, run those back and forth with them. And then you will also get a sense after you're gone whether or not the value proposition that you thought would be valuable to them would be actually valuable to them. That gives you some sense that you could be on the right track. But I want to caution you, make sure you proceed with caution. Why? Because people say one thing and they do another. I can't tell you how many times I've done surveys, I've done interviews with people trying to tweak my own model. People told me they wanted X, and then when I would roll out X, they would not show up. So, word of caution, look at what people do rather than what they say. That bodes well in all areas of life. All right. So you want to conduct at least 15 to 20 interviews to begin to see whether or not a pattern emerges. And you want to also conduct surveys and see if the pattern emerges. And then you want to structure your questions such that you're following, um, some of those areas within the value proposition. You want to ask questions that get to a point or get to how is it that they spend their time? What are some of their challenges? What are some of their goals that you're trying to reach, right? And then it's also helpful that you not do these interviews yourself. You might want to take someone with you. So you have 2 people, one person doing all the talking, right, or the main interviewer. The other person is actually listening carefully, taking notes, and asking follow up questions if he hears or she hears that something's not being covered. All right. And then after each interview, you and your partner would want to go and debrief, see, work well, what kind of information you were able to get, and then you use that information to actually improve on the content of your interview, the way you ask your questions, and all of that stuff. And what you don't want to do is ask people what they want. You don't want to ask them, even at this point, whether or not they like what you think the solution is. You want to leave that open ended and let people kind of tell you, what's hurting them. Let people tell you what their disappointments are with their current solutions. That could be a current process that you're using, a current product that they're using, or just the fact that they just wish they had something in hand that will help them to have better outcomes on their job. All right, so the focus is on your client or prospective client. And ideally, too, you want to interview people who represent your ideal customer, right? It does you no good, if you're interviewing youth and your primary target is adults and vice versa. So you have to, at this point, have in mind who your ideal customer is. And it might help too for you to do what we call a persona. Just imagine what your customer would look like, where he or she works, what his or her day is like, what some of his or her problems are, what his or her goals could be, right? So you want to be very empathetic and not necessarily impose your own ideas and your own will upon the people that you're interviewing. You want the information to flow freely from them so you can get authentic information, whether or not it supports what, what you'd like for it to be, whether or not this is actually going to be information you can use to move forward. In fact, it might be very valuable if the information you find out keeps you from moving forward and spending a lot of money on something that people won't buy. And another thing is you don't want to interpret or make inferences about something based on what people say. In other words, you don't want to read into what they're saying. So if it's something you don't understand, something that you need clarification on, make sure that you ask follow-up questions so that there's no misunderstanding. There's no reason for you to leave it to your own interpretation. And again, you want to do about 15 to 20 interviews. All right, so the next belief you may have, right? And again, this is after looking at your value proposition canvas, not so much your business model canvas, because quite frankly, the people that you're interviewing, your customers, they could care less or could not care less about how your business model looks, right? A business model is just a way that you're going to actually deliver value, and that could take on many, many different forms. You want to focus on those questions that uh, that will help you understand value, right? So if you believe that this problem exists at scale, meaning that you believe a lot of people have this problem and it's not just a handful of people, and so if a lot of people have this problem, then that means there's a larger opportunity for you. So the first thing you want to do is test, right? So after conducting the interviews, you want to test your value proposition again. And this time you're going to do it with the A/B test, right? You're going to run two versions of your ad, right? And you're going to focus again on those value propositions that you have developed. And usually your ad should just have one value proposition at a time, focusing on one segment of the market that you're trying to approach, right? So you're going to spend a few $100s on platforms like Google Display, Google Search, Twitter ads, LinkedIn, Instagram. The medium that you use to actually run these ads is going to be contingent on who it is you're trying to reach. So different demographics use different platforms differently. Younger people are using some platforms I probably have yet to know the names of, right? Your older, more established people are using Facebook. Your professionals are using LinkedIn. Your younger people are also using Instagram. So you want to match, who it is you're trying to target with the appropriate channel to run your ads, right? So again, you want to do an A/B test or split test, run two versions of the same ad. And then with the ad, you want to focus on one gain or one pain. So basically, pulling this information from your value proposition, and you want to see which um, which pain or gain resonates the most, right? And the ad that gets the most traction, highlighting, a feature that is appealing to a particular game, that's the ad you want to run with permanently. All right. So again, you want to refer to your value proposition in order to uh, develop the copy, the ad copy. If you're not good with writing in a way that really resonates with people, because your most successful ads, they touch the heart and not the head. I know for me, I have a tendency to be very cerebral, and it comes off in the ad copy. I have to work very, 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 very hard for my ad copy to sound more personable. If you have the budget to hire somebody to do your ad copy, then I strongly recommend that, because the problem with traction may not necessarily be the fact that you don't have value to offer. It might be the fact that you are not communicating in a way that gets traction with people that you want to reach. All right, so don't let language be a barrier. All right, so again, you want to try your ad on different channels, and see which channel gets most traction with what segment of your customer. And two, you can also do calls to action so that you can collect information on your people, right? One way to do this is through quizzes, right? People get engaged in the quizzes, and they give you a little bit of information. You understand who's actually interacting with your website, with your ad. Another call to action could be giving away a free product or free information, and you can collect email addresses. And then your next iteration or your next go round, you're reaching people who have shown some level of interest in your product or service, right? They haven't committed yet, but they at least have shown an interest, and you might get better bang for the buck by focusing on them. And the one thing you don't want to do is develop your ad in a silo. You want to make sure that you're using the data that you have at your fingertips. You've already done the value proposition. You had to talk to people when you develop the value proposition. You had to talk to people when you develop your business model. So why not use some of that information to actually develop your ad, and use some of those words to actually, that will trigger them to think about your response, right? And you also want to be sure too to tie it back to a hypothesis, and we'll go over how you can develop a hypothesis, later on in this presentation. So two things you want to link to: one, the value proposition, and two, the hypothesis. That way you can collect the data to know whether what you think is of value is in fact of value. All right. And then the third test, this is a test that you do when you believe your customer is actively looking for a solution, right? So you want to build upon the knowledge that you gained from the other two tests, so as well as from the interviews, right? And you still want to get stronger evidence. And the way you do that is a call to action. This call to action could involve them actually spending more time. It could be actually making a purchase, actually using your service, or anything that requires them to do something a little bit differently, right? And then you also want to simulate a customer experience without actually having to go through the process of building a prototype, so to speak. So, when we talk about that, that method is called the concierge method, where you are meeting people in an environment in which they're comfortable. You already have a good feel for how they go about doing their work. And at that point, you're just kind of guiding them through a series of questions that are very focused, that will help them to really simulate what their experience might be without actually touching and feeling the product itself. All right, so the first thing you want to do is prepare all the steps that are needed in order to create that product or service manually. Again, that's the concierge method. You're not at the point where you're actually building a prototype yet. And then, once you have those conversations, you want to be able to integrate the web page analytics. So when we talk about web page analytics, we're looking at how many people actually click on to your website. If they actually visit your website, do they go to the landing page where you're talking about this service or this product that you plan on rolling out? And that'll give you, again, some sense for whether or not people are interested. And then you also, too, you want to make sure that there's always some way of collecting addresses, too. When you do a call to action and people actually sign up for your mailing list so that they can get further information, that's also an indicator of whether or not they're interested. And again, you want to keep your eye out for patterns that emerge, and you want to use that information to develop your prototype. All right, so word of caution, don't take on more orders than you can handle. And this is for people who are testing their product by seeing if people will actually buy what it is they have to sell. All right, if you take on more than you can chew, one, you're endangering your reputation. You'll give off the reputation that you can't produce, right? And once that happens, it's very, very hard to live that reputation down. And then, even worse than that, you won't have the data that you need in order to determine whether or not this is a viable product. All right. So the fourth test is the test where, you have already, done your value proposition. You've already done your business model, even though you're not showing the business model to them. But, you have some ideas in your mind as to how you can deliver value to your customer, right? You've done interviews, you've done surveys, you have created your website. You've gotten people to give you a little bit more information. So you have a whole lot more information at this point than you did from the beginning, right? So you take the information, the data that you've collected through all of these processes, and you develop an MVP, or your minimum viable product. And this minimum viable product should basically focus on what you believe to be the most important feature that people are looking for when they make the purchase, right? And then as you go along, you want to do other MVPs that have a single feature. So at this point, you're testing, you're experimenting different features. And the reason why you do it where there's just one feature, and that feature can't be just any feature. It has to be a feature that is directly tied to what you believe the value proposition is, something that you believe to be of value to that customer, right? So you do this, with one feature at a time. You might have heard in experiments that you want to isolate a variable. So at some point, just like when you go to the doctor, you got an allergy, they tell you, well, eliminate X from your diet, eliminate Y. And you keep doing that until you can isolate that one thing that's causing you to break out. So it's the same thing when you do the MVP, right? So you're introducing products or MVP, you know, with one feature at a time, so you can begin to find out what that one feature is. And then over time, after you isolate that one thing, several times, you'll probably have several features that kind of fall off, and then several features that, really that really resonate with people. So you take that collection of features that resonate with people, and then you build another product and do a test of that. All right. So the recommendation is, first of all, you want to design the smallest version of your feature that solves a real problem. Either it solves a problem or it helps people to actually achieve a goal. And you want to use prospective customers that you have acquired, right, from your online ad. Those people, quite frankly, those people who don't know you, they have objectively looked at what it is you have to offer, and they have made the decision to give you further information. People don't just give up their email addresses easily. So if someone has taken the time to give you their email address as a direct result of some ad that you have or some article that you have relating to this product you want to roll out, that's a very good indicator that they find what you do valuable. It doesn't necessarily prove it, but it's a whole lot more powerful evidence than, the first one where you're just doing interviews, interviewing families, family, friends, and people that you know. All right. So you always want to design your test in a way that'll allow you to track specific data. And these data should always be related to your value proposition. All right. And they should also be related to your hypothesis too. And again, I'm going to show you in a minute how you can develop and test those hypotheses. All right. So you don't want to build a minimum version of your product. And when I say minimum version of your product, that is, the bare, I guess, bare bones product. You haven't been really intentional about putting features that tie into your value proposition. In fact, you probably focused on the low hanging fruit, just adding those features that are the easiest to roll out without, making sure that those value propositions actually line up with I'm sorry, make sure those features actually line up with the value proposition. So if the features you add don't help people's lives improve, if they don't help people to achieve their goals, if they're not solving a problem, if it's not minimizing pain, then there's no point in putting this in your MVP, right? And then you also want to follow up not only with the people who like what you have to sell, you really want to follow up with those people who don't want what you have, right? You need to understand what objections they have, not that you're trying to even sell at this point, and not that you're trying to overcome their objections. You just really want to get into their psyche and understand how they're thinking and how that information might help you make a better product. All right. So here is the strategizer test card. This is a good way to validate your idea. So it's a way to help you formulate multiple experiments, and when we talk about multiple experiments, you might be experimenting with price, you might be experimenting with features and other parts of the value proposition, right? So this is a test card. You want to name the test, and the name of that test should be related to, the product that you're thinking about thinking about rolling out. You put a date, you put a person's name who it's assigned to, and you talk about how long this should last. And then you're going to develop your first hypothesis. You're going to say, we believe X. All right. In order to verify it, we will do Y. And then we're going to look at our metrics, right? How are we going to measure this? And this data becomes, information that you can use to actually develop your final product or tweak your product. And the most important thing is you're also tying this process to your value proposition. And then step 4, what criteria are you using to determine whether or not you're right or wrong? And here is an example from Strategizer. They use this to test one of their courses before they rolled it out. So they're pricing the value proposition design course, and the contact person is Natasha. They didn't share a deadline or duration, but their hypothesis, and this is just one of several hypotheses for the same product. The first one, we believe that people are willing to pay $500 for a self-service online value proposition design course. And then you have to indicate, whether or not this is critical. So you rate yourself on a scale as to how critical this is. And then in order to verify that, we're going to simulate the sales of the online course on our website. So they actually had a landing page where they were advertising this course, right? And they were going to see how many people actually clicked onto the ad, how many people actually purchased based on that sequence, right? So the first thing they measured was how many visitors came to their website, how many the of those visitors actually clicked onto that landing page, how many clicked onto that ad, and how many people they actually converted or actually got to buy what they were selling. And they knew that they were right if the conversion rate, or the percentage of people who actually clicked on and bought and registered for the course, if the conversion rate is at least as high as the conversion rate for the business model generation online course. So they had experience, or they have experience with rolling out similar products at various price points. So they were comparing this new product, which is a course, to a similar course that they had already done. So they had some data to let them know what a successful rollout looks like, what a super successful rollout looks like, and what a bare minimum looks like, and what a failure looks like. So their rule of thumb, they were going to make a decision to go, you know, um, not so much a decision to go, but they will know that their hunch was right if they had a conversion rate at least as high as their business model generation course. All right. So after you do that, you do the learning card, right? Your first card tests your hypothesis. It tells you, even before you launch, before you know, go on and do further insights, right? And to get further information, you hypothesize what you think is going to happen. So the green card, you're focusing on what you think would happen, right? That's the test card. The learning card, or the blue card, you share insight. So you give the insight name, because remember, you're testing different features, different parts of the value proposition. So, and you want to do one learning card per customer segment, or per segment of the value proposition. And you talk about who's responsible. You indicate what you believe at first, right? And then you indicate what you have actually observed. And going back to, we believe that, that was your original hypothesis. We believe X would happen once we roll this out. What we found out, or what we observed, was Y happened. And from that experience, we learned what, right? And as a result of our learning, this is how we're going to proceed. So when you look at the observation, step 2, you want to rate your data reliability, right? On a scale of 1 to 3, I guess, with these thumbs up, small thumb indicating that the data is not so reliable. The large thumbs up meaning it's reliable. And then from step 3, the learning and insights, you indicate, whether or not some action is required, and you rank that, from low to high, and you'll just circle one of those. So here is a real life example from Strategizer. So they completed the learning card, and they captured the insights, and the insights that they got are going to be used not necessarily to green light the project. They, at this point, probably were not far enough along where they wanted to green light the project, but they did have good information to know that they were making an informed choice as to what to do next. So the name of this card is Product Manager's Interest for Value Propositions. And then for the hypotheses or the hypothesis, it's just a single hypothesis. You don't put more than one. So we believe that product managers are interested in the value proposition canvas. And just so you know, this is a different product than the one that we shared before, right? So this is product manager's interest for the value proposition canvas. All right, so we believe that product managers are interested in the value proposition canvas so that they could roll out better products and services. We found out that 32% of product managers clicked onto the link that we sent them. So we had a target of 25%. So that gives them a good indication that the market will probably receive them well. So they sent out an advertisement of this new product, and they said that if 25% would actually click onto the link, then we know that there's a potential to get some traction. But they actually did better than they thought that they would. All right, so from that, they learned that product managers could be a potential customer segment for the online course. So they're going to sell this course to more than one segment for customers. So you would do this experiment for every segment, as I said before. So therefore, we're going to do a test to see if a value proposition design online course for product managers generates a high click-through rate as well. All right. Again, they have not yet, green lighted the product to, go full throttle, but so far, at that point in the game, they were getting promising results. And then finally, here is the progress board. So this progress board is used to map all of your different hypotheses, your different experiments for a single product. So down the first column, you've got your hypotheses that you're trying to test. And these hypotheses could be around pricing. It could be around where people prefer to use your product. It could be around how they prefer to use it. It could be around the features, et cetera, et cetera. So you're doing all of these different tests, right? So you're going to do a test card, this first test for backlog, assuming that you uh, have a green card, right? A test card for all of those different hypotheses. And then the last column, you're going to look at what it is you actually learn. So at that point, you're going to post all of your blue cards. Now, you're not necessarily expected to fill up this whole canvas, but this is one way of looking at all of the different tests you're doing on the same product all at once, and then you can see where there's strong performance in some areas, weak performance, and not so strong or weak performance. So these little indicators here tell you whether or not your results have been validated or not. So at the bottom, if you see a check mark, is validated. If you see a question mark, they don't have enough information to determine one way or the other whether or not the actual test has been validated. And then the red with the X tells you whether or not it is not valid. So you'll rate yourselves, on those various benchmarks or those various tests. And then the progress, you indicate, what you believe progress has been made. So it's basically letting you know what the status is of those various tests, and you're putting different milestones there. All right, so that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to post. If you have any comments, feel free to post. If you have had any experience using these tools, feel free to post. All right. If you're in the Nonprofit Utopia community, you can continue this conversation in our community. You can do a post to share some of your experiences. In fact, one of our members has already started posting. He's already completed his business model. He has shared his business model through a video, and he's looking for feedback on his value proposition. So if you are a member of the Nonprofit Utopia community, please go into the community and check out John Emenecker's business model. He's looking for feedback, right? If you want to work on any of these ideas, you can set up office hours with me. And also, if you're a member of the community, you will have access to download any of the tools that we have talked about. All right, so without further ado, I am going to see if there are any questions or comments. Happy Tuesday, Kiela. And yes, I will be getting back to you. I'm not sure if you're still there, but I will definitely be getting back to you to respond to your email. And thanks for this webinar. I will have to watch the reply on YouTube. Not reply, replay, I guess, on YouTube. Thank you so much, Kiela, so much for stopping through. I realize that we're doing this during working hours and everybody can't spend, the entire time. But please catch it on the replay, and that goes for anyone. We're going to have this replay on YouTube. All right. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions or comments. Again, I want to say thank you so much for your time, and be sure to catch the replay on YouTube, and also be sure to catch me tomorrow when we actually talk about how you can start your social enterprise. All right, take care, and thanks again. Bye-bye.